let's go ahead and get into the top 5 lures, and I'm actually going to start with number 1, which is honestly probably one of my favorites, and that is a buzzbait. If you guys have been around this channel, you know how much I love fishing a topwater. Like, I almost named this channel Topwater Tyler a number of years ago because all I was going to do is throw topwaters, which would have been kind of cool, but at the same time, I'm glad I didn't. Now, a topwater is one of your best friends, and I will say that in the coldest water temps of the year, the best topwater bait that you can throw is actually a buzzbait. Now, I will say there is a water temperature that is too cold to throw a topwater. I will say that it is actually colder than you might think. You know, for a number of years, I remember not fishing cold water. Like, I would not fish a topwater if that water temp was like in the 50s. And now I honestly think that the 50-degree range, like water temp, is one of the best to actually throw a topwater. And I've caught bass on topwaters in upper 40-degree water temps. Now, depending on where you live in the country, you may not even see that type of water temps, but I know that for me, up in kind of the Midwest, northern part of the country, I can catch fish on a topwater in really cold water conditions. And the number 1 topwater I pick up is a buzzbait. And I don't know exactly what it is about a buzzbait that the bass seem to like in cold water. It's something that I also fish a lot during the pre-spawn of the year, is a buzzbait. So kind of in the coldest water temps where the bass are still pretty shallow, a buzzbait is just a very effective tool. Now, the thing that you should know about a buzzbait during this time of the year, you're not going to catch, you're not going to always go out there and catch a lot of them, but it seems like the best ones, or it seems like the fish that you catch, you have a great opportunity for catching a giant one for the body of water that you are fishing. Now, giant, again, it's relative. Some of you might be living in a part of the country where a 10-pounder is a giant. You know, up here in the north, a 5-pounder is a giant. Really, a 4-pounder can even be a giant depending on where you live. But a buzzbait will catch you really big fish. Now, one thing that you must do with a buzzbait in cold water, though, that's very important, you got to creep that thing. You got to make that thing come really slowly across the water. And so one of the best ways to do that, one, I really like to use this Warrior buzzbait that I'm going to flash across the screen right here. This particular buzzbait has a little bit of a blade on the bottom side of it. That blade actually allows that bait to have a little bit more lift in the water column, which also in turn allows you to fish that bait a lot slower while also keeping it on the top of the water. So that's one of the biggest things that I really like. In cold water, I want a buzzbait that is just creeping across the surface. I'm not going to rip that thing like you do in the summertime. I'm creeping it across the surface just enough to keep that blade moving. Now, during this time of the year, there's a number of places that you can fish a buzzbait. You know, at times I'm going to fish this in the back of like creeks where there might be bass that have pushed bait in the back of these creeks, and I'm fishing this buzzbait down rock banks or around wood cover. I've also fished this kind of on more of your main lake structures, for example, like a bluff. You know, a bluff is a great place to find bass year round, and during this kind of cold water time of the year, those bass will absolutely be on bluffs, and a buzzbait is a great way to cover a lot of water. So don't be afraid to pick up a buzzbait. I'm telling you, it will catch them in colder water than you might think. Now, let's talk about bait number 2, which is a crankbait. I absolutely love fishing a crankbait during the fall. To me, it is one of the best ways to simply cover water and get bit. I'm sure like it catches big fish, kind of like the buzzbait will. I just feel like it is one of the best ways to actually get bit. Now, during the fall time, there are a number of crankbaits that can work really well. I tend to stick to the crankbaits that are a little bit more subtle in nature. So baits that are like a flat-sided crankbait that typically have a tighter wiggle to them, those are ones that I like in the month of November. I also like your balsa baits. Baits like a Rapala DT6, a Rapala DT8. Those little bit more subtle baits in cold water just tend to get more bites. Now, there's a lot of other really good crankbaits out there. You know, like I love the Berkeley Fritz side, a Rapala Shad Rap. There's so many good crankbaits. I will say that there is one crankbait that kind of breaks the mold of November fishing, and that is a Storm, I believe Storm or Spro rock crawler. The rock crawler crankbait, you know, it really became popular in kind of the Ozarks. And the reason that I say it broke the mold is because this is a little bit more of a wide wobbling crankbait. It's one that you may not necessarily pick up a lot of times in cold water, but for whatever reason, that thing just catches fish during this time of the year. And the thing about that crankbait, it does have a really good hunting action to it where it goes back and forth really well, and maybe that's the reason. I'm not exactly sure. I just know that it's one of the few crankbaits I will pick up that is a little bit different than those subtle ones in really cold water. Now again, like buzzbait fishing, you can fish it in a number of different places, a crankbait that is. You can fish it in the back of pockets. You can fish it. What I end up doing a lot is I end up fishing it just on creek channel swing banks. You know, as bass are kind of going in and out of main creek areas, you know, they're going to hang a lot around those creek channel swing banks. The banks where the channel actually swings right up and hits the bank. Those are a prime area to fish that crankbait. You can fish it in like 2 foot of water all the way down to like 10 or 12 foot of water. Anywhere those creek channel swing banks kind of stop and they make a point, those are what we call like a bluff end or a creek channel swing point, a really good area. You know, a lot of times if they kind of coincide in the middle of the creek, that's what I call like a secondary point. That is a really good area to find bass during this time of the year. Also in the springtime during kind of the pre-spawn, it's a really good place that I find a lot of fish. So I always love to pick up a crankbait. It catches a lot of fish. I typically, this is the time of year where I will fish both kind of like crawfish patterns, and I will fish a lot of just shad patterns. And that's the thing. If I feel like the fish are on a crankbait of some sort, I will have a few of these things rigged up. I will keep rotating through them to see kind of what crankbait these fish are responding best to. But a crankbait is a great way to cover a ton of water during the month of November. You absolutely need to have it picked up. Now let's go on to bait number 3. I know that I've probably said all of these are my favorite. A spinnerbait, though, might be one of my absolute favorite bites. You know, a spinnerbait is such an old school technique that has worked for a number of years, although I feel like it kind of had a time and place where people got away from it. You know, people started fishing more crankbaits and more topwaters and more chatterbaits, really is what happened. And now what I've seen with a spinnerbait, at least where I like live in the country, is that a spinnerbait is like a really good big fish technique. Like I catch a lot of big fish on a spinnerbait. And to me, a spinnerbait during the month of November, one of the biggest things that I'm really going to do is fish it around muddy water. You know, during this time of the year, you know, you will have some more rain at times and it will muddy some of these creeks. And really what I have found is that fishing a spinnerbait in those muddy water creeks can be dynamite for catching a lot of big fish. And it doesn't necessarily have to rain, and it doesn't necessarily have to be muddy. You can catch them in bodies of water that are pretty clear on a spinnerbait during the month of November, absolutely. I just find that typically I am looking for a little bit more off-color water with this technique, especially off-color water that has some big shad in it. If you have kind of that combination, you can absolutely pick up a big spinnerbait and catch some big fish. Now the big thing with spinnerbait fishing, let it be like a jig almost. Get that thing inside of cover. You know, the best thing about a spinnerbait, or one of the best things about a spinnerbait, is it's a very just effective bait at coming through cover. Like it's pretty weedless. In that way, for me, I'm fishing this thing in laydowns. I'm actually, a lot of times I'll get right up on a laydown and I will pitch it like you would a jig or a Texas rig. I will pitch a spinnerbait and actually bring it through the water column that way. That way I can make really precise casts, get a spinnerbait where other guys have not got a spinnerbait, and it's a great way to catch a lot of big fish. It's absolutely one of my favorite ways to catch a lot of big fish. So anytime that I have off-color water, or anytime I can go find some off-color water, the first bait I'm going to pick up is a spinnerbait. Now let's talk about bait number 4. This is a bait that there's a lot of anglers who have mixed reviews on. And the biggest reason is that you primarily fish this bait with forward-facing sonar, but let me be 100% honest with you, this is a great technique without forward-facing sonar, and that is the jig head minnow. The jig head minnow, we all know it, we all have seen it. It's been dominating in tournaments over the last several years, and it is a great way to catch fish, especially if you're using forward-facing sonar like the Mega Live 2 that I have in my boat. Now, with that being said, I have picked this thing up and fished it in ponds before and caught a lot of fish. The thing that we have learned about this is that this technique is just one of the best ways to present a lure that looks very natural to a bass. And a number of years ago, I was actually fishing in a pond, and the only way that I could catch fish was with a jig head minnow. Now, obviously, I'm fishing in a pond, I'm fishing from the bank, I'm not using forward-facing technology, and still, this was like the only way that I could catch these fish. And so a jig head minnow is absolutely something that's on the front deck of my boat or just with me no matter where I'm fishing in the country during the month of November. Now, lure number 5 is a traditional cold water bait. You can use forward-facing sonar, you can fish it in a pond no matter what, and that is a jerkbait. Now, I just did a video all about fishing a jerkbait in cold water, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot here. Instead, I'm going to direct you to that video where you can learn the real specifics about fishing a jerkbait in cold water. So, guys, if you enjoyed this one, I think you'll like this one too. I will see you guys in the next video.